Good evening. It's Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, and this is the Bob Leonard Show. And like we tell you every week, we take the stories you've been reading about in the newspaper and watching on television for the week, and we put our spin on it. We try to interpret the story behind the story. And like we tell you every week, it's only our opinion. You can accept or reject it, but we're obviously going to have our say. Now, if you missed this program, it's repeated on Wednesday night from 11 to 12 on Comcast. And if you miss it there, it's also on flinttalk.com on the internet. So you just plug into it that way, and it has this program and a number of them that may have been on in the past. If you want to hit your button, it'll show you whatever show you want to see. But last week, again, we had some problems with here at Comcast where the program before our program had some problems with their tape, and it cost us about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of the start of our program, so that when our program came to when it normally ends, it cut off the last 4 or 5 minutes. And that's where we are, and we have nothing to do with that. So if you want to see the whole program, I think it's on flinttalk.com. So if you missed the end of it, you can pick it up there either last week or the weeks before, because we had problems with the week before too. But anyway, we've got a number of subjects we want to talk about tonight. One is some strange things going on in regard to Burton and the attempt by Mayor Smiley and his appointees to become unionized so that they when they get a new mayor, you can't get rid of them. And even though the question of unionizing is for a different purpose, and we'll talk about that. And we want to talk about the Flint senior citizen millage distribution and what's happened to that. And we will also update you on some of the new things that are happening on predatory lending. We've talked about it for the last 2 or 3 weeks. We have some new material that I think is very important. People say, you know, shouldn't you change the subject? Well, we changed the subject. The content has changed. But the important part here is when you're talking about predatory lending, you're talking about, first, you're talking about scams in regard to mortgages on homes. Well, you know, that's the biggest investment people will make in their lifetime. So obviously, if we can help them better understand what they should be doing when they're buying a home or when they're paying a mortgage, what to look out for. And then also, we have a lot of these scam artists in the credit card business. We'll talk about that also. So let's get started. Our first subject is this past week, Genesee County Sheriff Bob Leonard arrested 2 young hoodlums, one 14, one 15, who planned to shoot and kill a person and steal their car to go to Detroit to see some crazy entertainers down there. Life meant so little to them, they were going to do this, just to get a ride to Detroit. Now, since the time of their arrest, one of these punks' fathers has appeared on television trying to mitigate the seriousness of his kids and his friends' indiscriminate attack on innocent citizens. Because as you'll see, there was more than just a plan. They actually did some of these things. Fortunately, they didn't kill anybody, but they attempted to. Now, so far, to Prosecutor David Layton's credit, he's charged one of these as an adult, the 15-year-old, and is waiting on the juvenile judge to decide if the youngest one can also be charged as an adult. Here's Channel 12's report on this incident. Can you play that, please?
robbing and killing anyone who crossed their paths. Authorities say they arrested the 14 and 15-year-olds last Friday, one day after the pair fired shots at a Genesee County Sheriff's deputy. ABC 12's Taryn Nasher is live in the newsroom with one father's reaction. Taryn?
BC Daniel Show claims his son and his friends screwed up and should pay for their crimes, but claims investigators are blowing the teen's intentions way out of proportion.
There was no intent.
But authorities disagree and feel much of the evidence speaks for itself. The Genesee County Sheriff claims the 15 and 14-year-olds stole 2 guns from a family member to make their way to the Detroit area. The pair would steal cars and kill to get there. How do investigators know that? According to Daniel Schell, the father of 14-year-old Daniel Schell, both teens said that in their statements to detectives. But Schell says they didn't mean it.
They thought that, they were going to steal some cars. If they had to kill somebody, they would. But, talking about it, that's what they talked about. And that's different from, the intent of a hardened criminal.
Schell says the teens planned to go see the rap group Insane Clown Posse in Detroit, and the pair fantasized about living out the group's lyrics that talk about robbing and killing.
There's no bodies, there's no stolen cars. They thought they were going to do something, and they didn't.
But investigators say the 14-year-old did fire shots at this quick-save convenience store in Goodrich. When the deputy arrived at the scene, the 15-year-old shot at him but missed. Sheriff Pacal claims the next day the teens planned to rob and kill the clerk at this Last Chance party store. But Schell says the boys were just waiting there for a ride home. A deputy pulled over their car. The 14-year-old and the other teen's grandfather surrendered, but the 15-year-old attempted to drive away.
These 2 boys have a couple of problems that need to be dealt with. But at the same time, they say, neither one of them had the guts or intent to do this.
Both teens are facing several charges, including assault with intent to commit murder. The Genesee County prosecutor is still deciding whether to charge the pair as adults. Live in the newsroom.
Well, since that report, the prosecutor has decided to charge the 15 and is hoping to charge the 14. I mean, these guys are dangerous people. Well, the father says they have some problems. No kidding. They got a lot of problems. These kids, and it wasn't in the report, but I know this because we've investigated, these kids brought a gun to school, loaded it in the school, whatever school they go to, with the intent of going out and stealing a car. They planned to shoot and kill the driver of the car. They were going out and stand in the road and stop the car and shoot and kill a person, according to their own statement. Now, I normally would applaud a father's defense of his kid that is in trouble, but in this case, to suggest the kids were just being kids, it indicates to me why these kids are in trouble now. They had a gun in the school, they loaded the school, they were going to shoot somebody to steal a car, planned on killing him. Shot and tried to kill the deputy, shot in, they were going to rob a store and kill the clerk. They were there. They had the gun. They shot into one other store. Indiscriminate shooting. These guys, you don't say, well, let's give them another chance. They're just kids and they really didn't mean it. No, they didn't just say it. They acted some of these things out. Gunshots were fired at people. You got to take them off the streets. They're a danger to the whole community. Yeah, I feel sorry for the family and, the father. He's looking out for his kid, but he has to realize that you don't do things like that and then just say, well, kids are being kids, although That's in effect what he said. You know, they really are afraid to do this, and they wouldn't have done it. Well, they acted out. They shot that gun at some people, and they were going to kill, on 2 different occasions, they were going to kill somebody. That was their plan. Well, anyway, let's go on here. You know, last week and the week before, we kind of complained on this program about Flint being kind of shortchanged on the distribution of senior citizen millage. Has that caused the county to reconsider what they originally planned to give Flint for their share of the senior citizen millage? Now, just last week, the county commission, at the county commission meeting, a resolution was passed by unanimous vote, which included the 4 commissioners from the city of Flint, to fund 3 centers in Flint to the tune of $150,000 each. And then they would fund the other 13 or 14 out-county centers for the same amount. So Flint would be in line to get, of this $8 million that would be collected this week, would be in line to get $450,000 for their 3 centers. Yeah, we said then that when we complained that, you know, this approach of giving each presently active center $150,000 discriminated against Flint, whose taxpayers contributed approximately from the tax collections $1,300,000 towards the $8 million that will be collected this year, and every year for 10 years, to a total of $80 million going to be collected. You know, we argued here in this program that if Flint, like some of the more wealthy out-county cities and townships, had sufficient funds, they would have had at least 3 other centers serving seniors, which they had in the past. But they had to close because they were in financial trouble. But because of these financial constraints, there was only 3 of them open. And these were the 3 that the County Board of Commissioners was going to fund. Hasselbrink, Pierce, and Haskell. Now, since last week, and the week before when we were complaining, we've been told that Genesee County has relented and has agreed to fund 3 other centers that have been open in the past and have been closed inside the city of Flint. So they will have a second grant of $450,000, making up a total of $9,000. The new centers, or the centers that will be reopened, is a center in the south end, Brennan, Burston, we all know where Burston's up on Saginaw, and McKinley School Center, also in the south end. Now, I think that's good that they're making more adjustments to see that more centers are open in Flint. You know, we pay $1,300,000. There ought to be some consideration given for that. But, you know, there's still a serious problem here. How do you, what do you do? What methods do you do to go forward? Now, what I'm saying here is using senior citizen centers as the focal point for the distribution of these funds, when only about 10-15% of seniors use the centers on a regular basis. There's another 85-90% of seniors out there who don't use the center. How do we get some of this money to be used for purposes that help these people. Here's what the resolution said at the county board meeting 2 weeks ago when they brought this up and they passed this resolution that said each center would get $150,000. The center will provide at least 4 of the following services, they say. Socialization program services, you know, fine, card playing, whatever. That's nice. Educational programs. That will include any program that teaches a skill like computer usage and finance. That's a good thing. Health programs. These are programs designed to promote good health through education or medical checks. Checks for blood pressure, vision, cholesterol, diabetes, feet, education regarding these areas. You know, I don't see the Meals on Wheels here, which was one of the things they were touting when they were trying to get you to vote for this millage. And then it says congregate meals means meals apparently going to the center. And then transportation for seniors to and from the center. Now, all of that sounds good. But most of these centers don't have the resources to do this. They don't know where, first they don't know where the other 85% of the seniors live. Now, it seemed to me that's the first thing they should do is find out where the other seniors are in this county and what services they need. Do they need, can they get out to come to the center for the purposes of being fed, or do they have to have somebody bring it to them, like Meals on Wheels? Do they need a visiting nurse on a regular basis? How are they going to get their shots if they can't get out? Their flu shots or whatever shots they're taking. None of this has been considered. And the great majority of the seniors who would be using this millage don't use the centers. Be nice if they did. I think they'd enjoy it if they would go to the centers, but they don't use it. But we have an obligation to see to it that they get some assistance, some aid from this millage that we in this county voted for, that in 10 years will amount to at least $80 million. That's a lot of money. A lot of money. So you don't want to waste it. We don't want to be raising salaries for the employees of the center without some consideration for the use of the money in other ways. It's nice to have the director making $70,000, $80,000 a year, but do they have to make that much if we have all these other problems that we have to deal with this millage for the purpose of helping seniors? Well, we'll keep an eye on this because it's kind of an interesting thing going on here, and it's kind of really haphazard, in my opinion, right now. Whether that'll change, we'll be watching, and we'll let you know. You know, there was an article in the paper this week I thought was kind of interesting and caught my eye, because I know a little bit what's going on out there in Burton, in the city of Burton. And the headline says, Burton City Council rejects administrators' union pact. It's a little misleading. They postponed the consideration of it. They, rejected it on this date, but they've postponed the decision on whether to allow it. What we have here is 9 at-will employees hired by their friend Mayor Charles Smiley. They're trying to create a union, a new union, to represent them. Here's what it says. The City Council on Friday rejected a contract for the new administrators' union that included Public Works Director Charles Abbey, who is set to stand trial on federal charges this week. The union is usually because typically top administrators do not belong to unions. And it says another issue that has yet to be resolved is whether the union would conflict with the city charter. The charter could be interpreted to mean that employees are at will and not entitled to job protection offered by the unions. Now, these are all Smiley's friends that have been put in there over the years. You know, really, there's a clear indication here that the reason is for this union is, and the reason it's being made, the request is being made, is to guarantee their jobs. If Smiley chose not to run again, well, if he does choose to run, loses at the next election. He wants to keep these people, all his appointees, in those positions. You see, in my opinion, this effort to unionize for these people is being made for all the wrong reasons. You know, unions organize because their members are not getting a fair share of what they're producing. In other words, low wages, unsafe working conditions, providing reasonable health care programs, and future pensions. That's primarily the main reasons why unions organize. Now, in the 16 years that Smiley has been mayor of the city of Burton, these employees has always been at-will employees at Smiley's beck and call. And during that time, no one has ever complained about these 9 employees being appointed by Smiley during this time, because they're at-will people. In other words, they come and go depending on the mayor. They run important departments in the mayor's office or in the city of Burton. Now, everybody apparently accepted the city charter's provision that the city of Burton was run by a strong mayor form of government. And as a result, the mayor made all the administrative appointments. That's the theory behind it. You could hold him responsible. If things went badly, you hold him responsible, because he makes all these appointments. And these are the people running his departments. And if they're doing a bad job, the mayor should change them. That's the strong mayor form of government, as distinguished from, say, a council running the government with the appointment of a person who would operate the government. And, you know, and the result is, if you don't like the way the city is being run by the mayor and his appointees, you vote him out of office. Now, let's look at the basis for establishing unions. As I said, wages, working conditions, health benefits, pensions. And let's decide whether such problem exists in Burton with these 9 employees, which would allow the city to disregard the history of the city. That is, they've always been at will and appointed by the mayor, and the meaning of the city charter and what unions are supposed to stand for. You know, at-will employees' salaries range from $50,000 to near $75,000 a year. That sound like they're really hurting? They get an automatic 2.5 cost of living increase every year, no matter if the cost of living goes up or down. Now, what they want is, in this contract they're asking to unionize for, they want every 6 months the employees get 1 week compensation beyond their sick days, their vacation days, and their personal days. You give them an extra week. Now keep in mind, it's these under this deal they want, these extra weeks every 6 months would accumulate. No requirement that they use or lose them. For example, this accumulation, would amount to, say, 20 extra weeks every 10 years. And that's added to their, besides their vacation, personal, and sick days that they can accumulate. All of this accumulation would be added to the at-will employees' final value of their pension and payouts also. Keep in mind, at-will employees, these make no contribution to the pension plan. The entire pension expense is paid by the taxpayers. Conversely, the 100 or so Burton employees, city employees, union employees, must begin paying for the pension, their pension, after the city has contributed 12% yearly towards the ASME employees' pension. In other words, these employees, this rip-off of the taxpayer, these 9 at-will people, they don't pay anything towards their pension. And it amounts to about 40%, the contribution, about 40% of what they pay them as a salary. So a guy like Abby would be making around 73, 74, 75,000 under this deal, which he's making now, apparently. They would be paying about $32,000 beyond that salary to his pension. So, they got a pretty good deal on pension, obviously. In fact, it's probably the best deal in the whole county and maybe in the state of Michigan, because everybody normally contributes something to their pension. Now here, let's look at the health service benefits are gold standard for these people. You can't ask for anything more. Their working conditions. One of the other factors that would cause someone to consider a union. They have their own plush offices with secretary help. They have their own cars in many cases. They even, listen to this, they keep track of their own vacation, personal, and sick days. In the past, they were given 90 days a year in sick benefits. 90 days. Now the charter of the provision on that, the resolution on that, says that should be paid if the person terminates his employment. He can get as much as 90 days. Or when he retires, if he hasn't used it or she hasn't used it. These people were paying it 90 days every year. Every year they were doing it. We've talked about this before. It's a rip-off. And these payoffs every year increase their salaries anywhere from $7,000 to $11,000, $12,000, $13,000 a year. And again, this extra money was also figured into the final pension payouts of these 9 people. And often these people, some of these people would show up for work, like 3 days a week. And rarely was their vacation, personal days, or sick days charged, because they're in charge of the deductions. They keep the records. Some of these 9 positions include, for example, the Director of the Public Works, Mr. Charles Abbey, which has that salary near $75,000 a year. And he also receives 40% of the salary being paid towards his pension. Some of the others, at-will employees, making these lucrative salaries, and including, include the Deputy Director of the Public Works, the Comptroller, the Senior Citizen Director, the Purchasing Agent, just to name a few. Oh, these are people living high off the hog at your expense. It really comes down to this. Using the criteria to form an honest-to-goodness union. Wages, working conditions, health care, good pensions. None of these needs are evident here. Just the opposite. These are the highest paid employees in the city. They have the best pension plan in the whole city, and in the county, maybe in the state. Unlike the little guys who work for the city, they don't pay anything towards a pension plan, but they get these high wages and this lucrative pension plan. They have the best working conditions, cars, posh offices. Health care. Great health care. Bottom line here is this effect to unionize has nothing to do with the traditional reasons for organizing a union. The only reason these 9 at-will employees want to unionize is to keep their powerful political positions for Smiley and for themselves after he's gone. Any new mayor, you would think, would be hamstrung if he had to operate the city with all of Smiley's appointees or any mayor's appointees, from the last administration. Especially if they're in strategic positions like these people are. They'd be in a position to disrupt a new mayor's efforts to direct his visions for the city for which he was elected and campaigned. This deception of organizing a union for these people defeats the purpose of the strong mayor form of government, where the mayor is held responsible to conduct the city government, and then he would be ready to share the fame or the blame for whatever the end result may be. Smiley and his cohorts would defeat this whole purpose of unionizing. Unionism is a blessing where it is needed, and usually it's needed in the place employees say it's needed. And invariably, it's a decision made in good faith in the best tradition of union organization. The Burton scam detracts from the good motives that characterize almost all union organizations. The unions, and this effort they're making detracts from what unions stand for. Detracts from the history of unions. The history of unions goes back 125 years. The unions created the middle class in this country. They've done great things. So what I'm saying is, this effort by these people flies right in the face of this. They don't need wage increases. They don't need health care, pensions, better working. They have the best in the world there. They want this union so that they can keep their jobs. And it flies right into the face of the concept of the strong mirror form of government, where he appoints the people in these departments, and they're at his will appointments. And if they screw up, you can charge it to the mayor. And I'll tell you, the antagonism between Smiley and his chums he has in that office and the next mayor will be substantial, so there'll be absolute chaos in that city if these people are allowed to unionize and to keep their jobs. As I say, I've walked in many, many picket lines over the years, and I'm a very, very strong supporter of unions, but for the right reasons. When I was a youngster back in the East, and this is how I tie myself to unions, my family, my uncles and my grandfather were union organizers in the anthracite coal fields. And I can always remember how difficult it was for a young kid watching them come home in the afternoon after the organization work, beaten up by the Pinkerton people. That's where the Pinkerton became famous, in the anthracite coal field, beaten up and preventing people from unionizing. I remember that. I know the importance of unions. And we need unions in this country. But not for this purpose, because it flies right into the face of what unions stand for. And I hope they turn it down, because it's all for the wrong reason. Now, let me talk to you for a little while on the update you on the predatory lending thing. You know, we've been talking for some weeks now about how bad this is. We told you the definition of a predatory person is a person who robs and lives by plunder. And there's a new mortgage, a new entry into the mortgage business now throughout not only Flint and Genesee County, but all over the United States, and that's these predatory lenders. And really, in my opinion, the object is, in many of these cases, maybe not all of them, is fleecing home buyers out of their homes with deceptive mortgages and closing loan practices. They overextend the mortgage loans that have buyers. They can be, they can be expected to forfeit. They can't do the job. They can't pay the mortgage. Their income won't allow it. And the scam is based on the buyers, in many cases, missing a mortgage payment, even by one day, and they take and they forfeit the property. They can be evicted in 60 to 90 days. The buyer loses his home and any equity he may have in the home. And then the lender sells the home a second time. And if the second, sale price doesn't cover what the first mortgage owner owes yet, the lender goes after the first buyer. On the original note he signed on the first mortgage to make up the difference. They can't lose. These predatory lenders can't lose. Today, even people with what they consider safe mortgages, because it's with a reputable local bank, and they've had the mortgage for years without incident, That all could change if the local bank sells your still, fully unpaid mortgage to one of these predatory lenders, and then it starts all over again. You miss a payment, or you're late for a payment, and they come in and they start foreclosure procedures. The bank you're with, they didn't care. They say, hey, we just want you to pay the mortgage. If you're a week late or a day late or even one payment late, we'll make the arrangements for you to do that, to pay it. Not these people. They're going after the buildings. They make money because in many cases you have a substantial equity in the house. That's extra money for them. And then also they make money by, and it's illegal to do this. This is why the FBI is checking these people. And they've subpoenaed records right here in Genesee County from some of these mortgage companies. Sometimes these buyers are so anxious to get the mortgage on the house, they'll inflate their income at the direction of the predatory lender, the mortgage company. It's illegal to do that. And the result is, when they make the application for a loan, it looks like their income will cover it when in fact their income has been inflated. Now, just this week, last couple of weeks, we've had this company called Sunrise that has been in the news. And I'm not suggesting these are bad people. They may be very good people. But you can see what happens here. They ran out of money. And people have signed mortgages. The mortgage money's been given to them. And they haven't built the houses. Here's an example of what I'm talking about here. Up in Minnesota, it says here, suit says broker steered buyer to high-cost services. A class action is focusing fresh attention on the long festering consumer issue in real estate, alleged steering of home buyers to affiliated title settlement and mortgage companies by large realty brokers, and they also are talking about contractors here too. So they brought a class action because it's so outrageous. But anyway, since that time, obviously this problem of predatory lenders and subprime lenders, and you'll hear about that, this is a very serious problem nationwide. Can you play that first story on subprime lenders for me, please?
We're really seeing how this problem is coming to play. New Century Financial, the nation's second largest lender to people with poor credit, says its bank lenders have cut off financing. That's a huge problem for New Century, as it needs to borrow big sums in order to make its home loans. On top of that, the banks and Wall Street firms that have lent money to New Century can demand that it buy back more than $8 billion in outstanding mortgage loans. And New Century simply doesn't have the money to do it. Heidi.
Susan, so are we talking about bankruptcy then, or not quite?
Pretty close to it. At this point, it's a move that many analysts are expecting. The company is also dealing with a criminal probe. As a result of all this, New Century stock tumbled nearly 80% last week. We were reporting it. Some analysts were calling it a death spiral. Today, trading on New Century is halted. News pending. And New Century isn't the only lender getting hit. A jump in late payments is leading to more and more foreclosures. One of the reasons why, no money down home loans. And now Countrywide, the nation's biggest mortgage lender, will stop offering those types of loans. Countrywide's new policy calls for at least a 5% down payment. Shares of Countrywide are losing nearly 3%. The big concern, whether the trouble in the subprime sector will trickle into the rest of the economy. Right now, those worries in Wall Street.
Now, what's important here is that Countrywide that you saw listed there They have all kinds of mortgages here in Genesee County, hundreds of mortgages here. And when they start getting demands for money from the subprime lender that you saw there, Nationwide, or I can't remember what the name it was, but they start demanding their money, these people are going to start foreclosing these loans if you miss a day and paying your payment. They'll get the money. But that's what happens with predatory lenders. Now, here's another story from CNN on credit cards and predatory lenders. Can you play that for me, please?
Interest rates, grace periods, and fees. Industry reps warned, or they were warned, that if they didn't voluntarily clean up their act, they could actually face stricter regulation. It's good to have someone to blame for the credit crisis, isn't it? I mean, we all know that we spend more than we earn, and we finance that imbalance often with credit. But what if the credit crisis isn't really your fault at all? Well, that's something that James Scurlock suggests in his new movie, Maxed Out, isn't it, James?
Well, yes and no.
Tell me what do you didn't come to this conclusion when you started this film. Tell me what you learned.
Well, I started with the assumption that everyone is just being irresponsible. But one of the absurdities of the new system is how the definition of personal responsibility has changed. You know, I talked to a lot of people who had done everything right. They had no credit cards. If they wanted something, they saved up and paid cash for it. And then they went out to buy a home or rent an apartment or get utilities or insurance, and they found out they had a terrible credit score. You know, and they said, how could this be possible? I'm doing everything right. I'm being responsible.
James, tell us, for people who haven't seen your film, my understanding is, and it's coming out, right about now, I believe, it focuses on people that have really tragic consequences from the debt. Can you explain a little bit about that and explain whether or not it's an extreme situation that you filmed?
Well, we looked at everything. I mean, we look at people flipping multi-million-dollar spec homes, and we look at people in the deep south who are drowning under these predatory mortgages that we're now hearing a lot about. So, the film is pretty broad in scope, but there are a lot of people who have been taken advantage of. And if you look at the subprime numbers that came out recently, you'll find millions of people who couldn't pay their first mortgage payment or their second mortgage payment. So these loans are really designed to fail.
You talked about in the movie a little bit about how they keep adding on fees and changing the contract on you, and you don't really know what you're dealing with because you can't even figure out the credit card contract. Can you talk about that a little bit, how this just piles on top of people? It could just be something small that they started out with, and then in the end it just turns into this mountain.
Right. Well, credit has gone from being a business that made money on interest and on a spread to being a business that makes a lot of money on fees. I think fees have gone up 1,000% in the last 10 years for credit cards. So we had a Harvard Law School professor who couldn't understand a contract. There's an MIT math professor who can't do this double cycle billing math that a lot of the credit card companies use. So for most consumers, it's just, it's impossible. Plus, the terms and conditions can be changed at any time for any reason. So at the end of the day, the contracts are kind of meaningless to begin with.
Yeah, I got one of my credit cards sent me something in the mail this week, a change in the terms and conditions. I actually just threw it out. I wasn't going to read it. I have debt. Right. I work in this business. I have debt. I pay interest. I'm assuming you have some debt and you pay interest. Did you learn anything out of this thing other than the sort of misery that people live under in debt? Did you learn some magic trick that's going to help you do better?
Well, if you do the numbers and you look at why people declare bankruptcy and you look at why people are in debt, the only real solution is to never go to the hospital, never get divorced, and never lose your job, which I don't think is that realistic for most people, and probably never go to college. Other than that, I think you just have to be very, very wary. A lot of these people get the credit card offers and take them at face value. But if they're getting a credit card offer, it's not because they're responsible or because they're a platinum person or a gold person. It's because they could make some money for the credit card company.
James, let's bang on Congress a little bit. There was a big hearing this week and everything, and they had all the big boy credit card companies come, oh yes, we promise we're going to be more transparent with our customers, which is a bunch of malarkey, quite frankly. I know you've been following it carefully, but, all these banks have big lobbying organizations that help get their point of view across in Washington. Is there any realistic chance that we'll get some sort of change out of D.C.?
Well, I think the congressmen are still sort of stinging from this bait and switch with bankruptcy reform, where they were told that if they passed the bill about a year and a half ago, that all Americans would get this dividend in the form of lower interest rates. I think they said it was $500 or $600 we were all paying because people were gaming the bankruptcy system. And nobody's gotten a dividend check yet. And I don't think interest rates have come down. So, I think Congress is very angry about this. And you have the new Democrats in charge of the committees and oversight. And they're really taking these guys to task.
James, in the research it said that one of the best ways to stay out of debt is not to have children, which is funny and also sort of depressing for Alan and I. Explains why Allie is so well dressed always.
But all kids have to pay for it.
But so if you've already messed that up, and other people say don't have credit cards, pay for everything in cash. That seems impossible as well. Pay your monthly bill on time. Okay, well that's not always practical. But so what else can you do to make sure that you don't fall into trouble? You talked about not getting divorced or running into health problems. So is there anything else that you can do? Because sometimes these things are just, those big things are out of your hands.
Sometimes you can call the companies and negotiate with them. Sometimes if you're in a lot of, ironically enough, if you're a bad credit risk, I think you have a lot more leverage with the credit card companies because they know you don't really have anything to lose by not paying. But you can sometimes call them up and negotiate a lower interest rate.
James, did you use credit cards to get this film done?
I didn't use credit cards to finance the film. I did use them in the making of the film to do hotel reservations and plane tickets and all that kind of stuff. Credit cards are great. They provide a convenience, and people should be willing to pay a fee for that service. The trouble is these fees and interest have nothing to do with what they're costing the banks. They're just feeding this huge profit machine.
It's a worthwhile film to see. James, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Catch the film if you get a chance. Maxed Out. James Scurlock is the director. Alan?
Now, like we tell you, and we told you on this program how this has happened here in Flint and Genesee County, and we described some cases of that here a couple of weeks ago where people who one fellow had a home for 20 years and had a $40,000 equity in it, and he was late paying his taxes, which he did every year, and the original mortgage company who had his mortgage before they sold it to this predatory lender never objected because he always paid his taxes ultimately, and they were never, the house was never forfeited for tax purposes. But in this case, the company sold a mortgage to a predatory lender, the original mortgage company, and he was one day late. They foreclosed on his home. They gave him 30 or 60 days to get out. He had to get out. He lost his equity. He lost whatever else he put into the house, the building and the increasing the value, and he was out. So the predatory lenders are different than local banks usually, because local banks you can deal with, they're more interested not in making a profit, an unfair and unreasonable profit, and a scam. They're not interested in scams. But they can sell those mortgages to these predatory lenders if the predatory lender makes them a good offer. So you have to be on guard against something like that, and you should probably put it in your mortgage that they shouldn't sell it without giving you notice, and if you object, that they can't sell it. But here's another story on predatory lending out of CNN. They have a tremendous program on Saturday on credits and things like that on consumer protection. Can you play that next one?
College, and then just a few short years later, they've got about $4,000 in those credit cards.
All right, well, let's talk about just how bad they are. We've had Senate hearings this week. Senator Carl Levin has been discussing the practices, calling them predatory practices by the credit card companies. You agree?
Absolutely. It's no exaggeration to call this a crisis. When you have a company that, for one late payment, can raise your rates to 29%, I mean, that's nothing but victimizing people.
There's also something called a universal default, which a lot of people don't know about.
That's right. And Citicorp's executive at these testimonies, he vowed to stop this policy. But what it is, if you make a single late payment on any one of your accounts, the credit card companies will call up that report and they will raise your rate on every single account you own.
So let's get some advice now for people signing up for credit cards or those that already have the credit cards. You're actually supposed to read the fine print. A lot of people don't do that.
That's right, absolutely. Make sure that you pay over that minimum payment because that minimum payment is designed to trap you into payments for as long as possible. Don't assume that there's a grace period because lots of times they can take that away. And, you know, there's really no alternative to paying your bill every month on the day that it's due.
All right, Anya, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have to leave you early. Thanks so much for your time on this Sunday morning. We appreciate it.
Now, let me tell you that this predator lending, as she mentioned that Senator Carl Levin mentioned, he's the chairman of the committee now. The Democrats control the Senate. He's chairman of the committee, which are going to make some changes, obviously. The Republicans, when they control it, set up the bankruptcy laws to help the credit card companies. I mean, that's the difference in the parties. I mean, they both screw up, but when it comes to philosophy, that's the difference. Credit card companies are going to be protected by the Republicans, and the consumer is going to be protected by the Democrats. And there may be some Republicans going, don't let me hear anything about that. I've been at this thing for 75 years now, and I know what's going on here. But anyway, let's look at this. Here's the impact of predatory lenders. Here's how they do it. Can you play that next tape?
That we're not on it.
Colorado retiree Mary Lou Foley and her husband look over the adjustable rate mortgage that was once their saving grace. It is now their worst nightmare.
I've been packing because I'm waiting any minute to get the bad news.
Mrs. Foley believes they will soon lose their home. They refinanced to free up money for medical bills. Mr. Foley has early Alzheimer's. The couple was sold on the promise of paying just 2% interest. But it soon began to jump. Their $1,700 monthly payment doubled.
This is the most devastating thing that has ever happened to me.
The Foleys are among the millions of homeowners who took advantage of adjustable rate mortgages with low interest rates. Others turned to subprime mortgages, as they're called, that overlooked bad credit. They all helped fuel the housing market, but the risks are now being realized.
Giving these people the loans without really giving them the education was a little bit like giving somebody a loaded gun without the training.
Borrowers in 2005 and 2006 are defaulting more than 2 times the rate of those who borrowed in the 2 years prior.
It's almost a perfect storm if you're a homeowner who's in distress right now, because you're seeing housing values go down in parts of the country, so the house might not be worth what you paid for it.
These riskier mortgages are now under the eye of federal regulators who are proposing stricter guidelines for banks. Experts say lenders are now scrambling to police themselves before somebody else does. Raising the bar might prevent future foreclosures, but what about families like the Foleys?
To end up in a situation like ours in our old age, to be thrown out, it's just a travesty.
Experts say it's a scenario that will likely repeat itself for months to come. David Muir, ABC News, New York.
All these tactics are predatory. In other words, they were told they'd be paying 2% interest, even though they know an adjustable can go up. They're told generally, don't worry about it, it won't go up much. Well, these people really don't care if it goes up because they got the house they can take, like this woman in this man's house, and they're protected. They don't lose anything. They just lie. So you've got predatory lenders in the credit card business and in the mortgage business, and you have to be careful. And just like that woman said about credit cards, pay more than your monthly bill and start cutting that down. There was a story in the paper the other day where a fellow had a credit card bill of $4,700, and he had paid $9,000 over the 10 years he's been paying on it, and he still has $5,100 or $5,200 he owes on the credit card. I mean, there's no way you can get ahead of these people. The best thing to do is if you can pay it off every month, and if you if you're not able to pay it off this month, you're going to be charged really something. And now what they're doing, they're going to increase your rates based on you slow paying on your electric bill or your gas bill. It has nothing to do with them. They'll increase your rate. Anything to penalize you to get the money. And that's what this is all about. And that's why you got to watch your mortgage payments, make them on time, and if there's a problem and it's not your regular mortgage company, look out. Look out. Make sure if you get a mortgage locally that they keep the mortgage and they don't send it or sell it to another mortgage company. Put that into your contract. Well, anyway, I think we're too late for that other comment. But anyway, the Charles Abbey trial is going on in federal court. It'll be interesting to see what happens to that. And it started yesterday, and it's going on today. And it's interesting, some of the things, if you get a chance to read the newspaper, the Journal has some interesting story, the fellow that was covering it. And that's in today's paper, Tuesday. So, but in the meantime, you know, come back to us next week. We'll have some new stories, and we enjoy being with you. Between now and next week, we'll see you at the White Horse.